Welcome everyone. Welcome back to the second session of this final day of Comms Hero Week. And what an honor it is to introduce a multi-award winning Comms Hero legend to the stage, Shayoni Lynn. And let me just get the bio up, because this is, there's so much stuff to tell you about Shayoni that I've got to read it from her bio. So Shayoni is a CEO and founder at multi-award-winning behavioural science consultancy Lynn. She's also a fellow of the CIPR and PRCA and chair of PRCA Cymru. I had to get my pronunciation right there. She's listed in the PR Week Power Book 2021 and 2022, and the definitive list of the most influential and respected comms professionals in the UK. And in 2021 was listed in the Propel 100, a list of the most influential PR agency professionals in the world. So what an honor it is to welcome Shayoni to the Comms Hero stage. So what is Shayoni going to be talking to us about? Using behavioural science to power your communications. So this session, Shayoni is going to cover and discuss how a better understanding of human behaviour can help boost communications outcomes, connect with audiences in more meaningful ways, and drive positive societal change. She'll provide an introduction to behavioural barriers, structural, informational, cognitive, social, and outline how measurement and evaluation can be embedded into behaviour change campaigns to demonstrate strong ROI for comms teams. So Shayoni, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Asif. I'll move on to the next slide, but thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. It's my first Comms Hero, so I'm very, very excited to be here and talk about something I'm so passionate about.
And people will get that definitely from you. So let's show some emoji love to Shayoni before she kicks off, and I'm sure that will continue. Don't forget questions and comments. It's a rare opportunity to have access to such an absolute legend. So please take that opportunity to ask those questions, and I'll come back in about 15 or 20 minutes to pick up those comments and questions. So enjoy the next quarter of an hour.
Thank you, Asif. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I've got my contact details on there should we want to connect on Twitter. But I'm very excited to talk to you today about how behavioral science can be used, I feel should be used to power communications and achieve change for good. So before we kick into sort of the nitty-gritty of what we do at Lynn, and I've also got a case study to share with you, I want to kick off with a definition of behavioral science. So what is behavioral science? There are many definitions, and today I'll use Matt Wallard's definition, which is behavior as an outcome, science as a process, because we're talking about applied behavioral science, which is fundamentally about changing behaviors. Behavioral science helps unlock why people do what they do. It provides a deep understanding of the conscious, the subconscious, and unconscious motivations, influences, and drivers that drive our decision-making every day. It can help explain why we behave the way we do, but also in some cases predict how we will behave in the future. So what drives behavior? There are several drivers. There's psychological, sociological, environmental drivers. And using behavioral science in communications is about understanding and analyzing those drivers, interpreting those drivers to make recommendations for change. So at Lynn, we are all about changing behaviors through education and persuasion, never through manipulation. I've done many of these talks and I get the ethics question all the time. So I now have a slide that establishes where we sit in terms of ethical use of behavioral science. At Lynn, we're all about preserving agency. And what that means is we never take away choice from our audiences. Instead, we present choices in a way that's most instinctively and intuitively received by audiences. And we hope that by doing that, by presenting information in a way that's most receptive, that our audiences will make the decisions that will help improve and save their lives. And this is our mission statement at Lynn. More on lynn.global should you want to visit our website. But inherently, we believe that when you inject behavioral science into communications, you can build better, smarter campaigns that can create the behaviors needed to achieve a positive societal good. And this is a quick snapshot of how we set up at Lynn. We have the BS unit, behavioral science, of course. And the BS unit looks at everything from research through to experimentation and evaluation. We have 2 advisors on the BS unit. We have Dr. Laura de Moliere, who is the former head of behavioral science at the Cabinet Office. I'm sure many of you have worked with her. And also Chris Perry, who is the former head of behavioral science at Ipsos. Then we have campaigns, which is our integrated end-to-end solutions. That is very focused on outcomes, and we've got a case study that demonstrates the work run by the campaigns team, which is overseen by Alice Cardigan, who is the former managing partner at Ogilvy. And then we have the misinformation cell headed up by Stefan Rolnick, who formerly was in the Wales First Minister's office. And the misinformation cell was launched last year as the UK's first anti-disinformation service dedicated to PR and communications. We've done a lot of work in the misinformation cell, and I know it's of interest to a lot of colleagues. We've worked in the public sector in the UK. We're working globally, but it gives us great sense of pride, I suppose, in some of the pro bono work we do with the misinformation cell, most recently working with the war team in Kyiv in the fight against Kremlin disinformation. And we have 3 practice areas. Lynn Health. Lynn was founded 3 years ago, just before the pandemic. And so we've grown through the pandemic. So we're very, very, I suppose, good at health communications. That's where we've had the most amount of work. We've recently launched Lynn Planet, which is a climate change and sustainability practice, which brings together macroeconomists, behavioral scientists, misinformation strategists, sociologists to create and systems thinking approach to sustainable solutions for the future, and Lynn Change, which is our change management practice. Right, so now we can get into behavioral science. So traditionally, mass behavior change comms has been viewed through the lens of awareness raising. So you have an existing behavior, you raise awareness, i.e. you inject messaging through to audiences, and then audiences miraculously change their behavior. Now we know that this isn't the case. So instead at Lynn, we focus on understanding what is the problem that we're trying to solve, what are the behaviors we're trying to influence. And we review the barriers to that behavior through, as Asif said, the lens of cognitive, structural, informational and social barriers to get a better understanding of how to motivate change. At Lynn, we use formative and summative research to better understand populations so we can drive the right outcomes. So when we look at a problem, vaccinations, for example, we undertake local primary research, which is conducted in-house, to understand the motivations, the norms, the influences of that population before we design the communications and the creative concepts. So we know what to tell them and why, how and how it will affect them in persuading them to adopt that behavior. So for vaccinations, do they know how to access vaccinations? Can they access vaccination clinics? Can they access the online booking form? What are the social and cultural norms when it comes to vaccinations? So a lot of issues we work with, especially in public health, is quite complex. It's quite normative. So it's really important to have that quality research underpinning the creative approach. Case study I have will demonstrate the importance of research as well. At Lynn, we, to our knowledge, and no one's challenged me, so I'm going to keep saying it until someone does, but we're the only UK agency that has embedded experimentation into all campaigns. And what that means is we test our recommendations, our solutions in a randomized manner to secure statistically significant outcomes before we activate a campaign. So, and that means we're testing everything from creatives to content to calls to action to user journeys. This isn't just A/B testing. We're running randomized controlled trials. So we're really looking at several treatment variables against a control to see, based on audience segments, which segment prefers which creative, which content, which call to action, to create then an activation, the most persuasive messaging, visuals that will motivate our audiences to change their behaviors. And then evaluation at Lynn, everything we do is based on outcomes. We're very, very outcomes driven. We are evaluation obsessed. So we set baselines at the beginning of all projects. We undertake real-time monitoring to ensure that campaigns remain optimized, so we can take an iterative learning approach during the lifetime of the campaign. And so we can be fully flex, so we can change tactic at very short notice if needed. So we're not just looking at active monitoring, which is the impact of strategy and interventions on our audiences via, say, pulse surveys or focus groups, and then looking at the prevalence of behavior, which is typically how evaluation happens. So you've got active monitoring, prevalence of behavior. In our world of public health and climate change, much of that behavior might occur anyway. So what we're also monitoring is the change process, so we can attribute communications impact back on real world behavior change. What does all of that mean? So I'll take you through this case study, Don't Miss Your Vaccine. I hope some of you have seen this, heard me hopefully talk about this before. It's a really good example of how behavioral science can be embedded into campaigns at speed, at massive pace, but still achieve the outcomes that are required and demonstrate the value of communications to organizations. So don't need to remind everyone about the vaccination program that we've all been through and many of us have led and managed. Fundamentally, I think the belief was that when we move from the priority audiences through to the mass population, when it goes into the mass program, that there would be high take-up, especially in young audiences. However, what we observed in England, certainly, and also in Wales, was there was high levels of hesitancy that wasn't predicted in young people. So we were brought in by a client, our Healthier Southeast London, to help them drive as many young people to access the vaccinations as possible in the run-up to Freedom Day, when all the restrictions were to be relaxed. So it was a very, very quick turnaround. And by quick, I mean a week. We turned an integrated campaign around in a week. Never doing that again. But even at that pace, we did not forget to ensure we were strategic. So these are our SMART objectives, or C-SMART objectives. And you'll see the very basics of reach, engagement, conversion. But what we needed to demonstrate was real world behavior change. So we set baselines of vaccine take-up within those audiences. We established monitoring systems, and we established ways of receiving that data back so we could align what we were seeing in the campaign versus the real world impact of shots in arms. As I said before, research is fundamental to every piece of work that we do at Lynn. We don't do any work that does not let us conduct an element of primary research. We were able to turn this campaign, it still says Lynn PR. We were Lynn PR before this, we are now Lynn. We were able to conduct this campaign at pace and turn this around in 1 week because we had quite a lot of existing primary behavioural research into this specific topic with audiences across England. So we were doing quite a lot of research into this topic, which we were able to embed through. Also, we were working with our client we were still working with them 3 years in. So we knew that patch really well. So that combination of factors really helped us deliver this at pace. Our client, of course, had a lot of data themselves, and we were able to embed that through into our communications planning. So we start with what is the target behavior that we want to achieve? What are the barriers to that behavior? Looking at cognitive, structural, informational, social. And here's a snapshot of some of the behavioral barriers that we identified. There were many more, but some barriers that we identified that were getting in the way of our audiences accessing the vaccine. One of the big things through all the COVID-19 behavior change work we've done is how we perceive risk. So that's a really, really important space. So in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know what COVID-19 was. It was a described risk. So when we experience a described risk, which we haven't personally experienced, but we've been told is a risk to ourselves and our families, we tend to be quite compliant. Hence, we saw that high levels of compliance in the early days of the pandemic of staying at home. But as we live with that risk, as we experience that risk, so we go from described to experienced risk, and we realize that perhaps the impact of that risk is not as high that we were made to believe. So in this case, young people say going to the pub with their mates, or whatever, not wearing a mask, and not still catching COVID, we tend to then push the thresholds of that risk further. And that then leads to more risk risky behavior. So that was a really important insight for us, and we've seen this across every piece of work we've done. So really important to be responsive to that way of thinking within our audiences. And here's the segmentation that we undertook for this campaign. Don't Miss Your Vaccine is now in its 10th iteration, or maybe 11th. This is iteration 1 in July of last year. And you'll see the age banding is to align with the vaccine data. We also needed to communicate with at-risk communities, especially ethnic minorities or audiences from BAME backgrounds. So we needed to ensure that we were communicating with them and persuading them as well. And also we'd identified specific areas within our patch where take-up was low. Don't Miss was the UK's first campaign that reframed vaccination for young people from that whole protect your community narrative through to personal benefit. And this was because our research had demonstrated that young people felt quite tired. They felt that protection message wasn't resonating. They felt like they'd been scapegoated by the media. There was a lot of real frustration in young people. So we leveraged the concept of freedom, and we reframed vaccinations from a threat to personal freedom, because of course, COVID has been all about agency being taken away from us. We're being told what to do. We reframed it into more of a proactive, positive choice. The creative brand was created to strategically connect vaccination with personal benefit, as I said, to also rise above the noise of all the other public health messaging that was out there, and then actively promote vaccine take-up as a very, very positive thing that would affect them personally in ways that are meaningful to our audience. We created this video, which I hope many of you have seen or even used, because we did rework this for NHSE and it was scaled England-wide, but this particular asset was fundamental, I think, to a success. We used this on digital, we used this above the line, so it was really, really important way of bringing our audiences into our campaign. So I talked to you earlier about experimentation, and what that means is ensuring that our hypotheses actually replicate when we activate a campaign. In behavioral science, there's a huge replication crisis. What works now may not work tomorrow. What works here may not work in another area. So experimentation then becomes critical to ensure that the solution is the right solution for that particular audience in that particular context. So when we experiment, and at Lynn, we call it the rapid test phase, we ran, because we had not much time, we had 1 week to turn this around, we only ran one trial. We looked at which behavioral frame motivates action for each of those segments that we talked about. And if you reflect back on those behavioral barriers that we'd identified, optimism bias, risk perception, status quo, we needed to understand whether those would be persuasive in moving our audiences forward. So we had a control messaging, which was based on the protection message, and then we had several treatment variables that we were testing. So we can see with the younger audiences, they were more motivated to see others around them behave in this way. For people in their 30s who probably either have a job or have a family, they were probably forgetting to get their vaccine. So a prompt was really useful. And for BAME communities, we found that a loss lens was a powerful motivator. So I'll just quickly take you through the PESO mix. So this was an integrated campaign, full PESO mix. For paid, we ran paid adverts on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We had video ads. We also did audio ads on Spotify and DAX. They were also quite successful in, as we say, raising awareness, but we were able to track them back into activity later on. We ran video on demand, a really effective way of engaging with younger audiences. And then we also did quite a lot of activity on Snapchat, and the iterations of Don't Miss, we did also run specific work streams on 12 to 15-year-olds, and we found Snapchat to be a really effective channel for younger audiences. Owned, so there was a lot of organic media that we were running. We also hosted Instagram live Q&A sessions through the lifetime of Don't Miss, which is 1 year plus now. We have really used live sessions on Instagram, Facebook to reimagine public engagement. That's been really, really successful. We had every intention of doing next door, but to set it up took so long. We weren't able to activate it for this particular 4-week campaign. And then with the campaign landing page, which is now full microsite, so nhsselvax.com, so you can have a look at what the whole microsite looks like now. We, at that time, for 4 weeks, just did a campaign landing page, and we ensured that we were creating the best possible decision-making environment for our audiences, what we call choice architecture. Shared, it was really important to us and is important to us in every single campaign that we run, that we are our client is not the only messenger. So we work in partnership with stakeholders. We create toolkits. We make sure that our message is amplified as widely as possible. In this particular case, the Mayor of London was really supportive also of our campaign. So what does this mean in terms of outcomes? I did say at the beginning that we are outcomes obsessed. This will demonstrate that we smashed all our KPIs when it came to reach and engagement and conversions. But really, what does that mean in terms of lives improved and lives saved? So here we can see the real world impact that Don't Miss Your Vaccine had in those 4 weeks. We were able to attribute a 77.8% improvement for 18 to 29-year-olds, 10.8% improvement to 30 to 39-year-olds. And we also saw a sharp rise in vaccine take-up in BAME audiences compared to those of white ethnicity. And it's also won quite a lot of awards, which is great, of course, 4 national awards, most recently NHS Communicate, where that is the wrong image. So that's last year. We were shortlisted last year. We didn't win, but this year we did win. We won Best Behavior Change Campaign, and we were highly commended for Best Use of Insight and Best Digital Engagement. So that's it from me. Happy to take any questions. I'm hoping Asa will join back. There we go.
Here we go. Thank you very much, Shayoni. That was amazing, and lots of. Let's show some emoji reactions for Shayoni, please. That was insightful, and we've got some questions that have come in as well. There's going to be time for more questions, so please drop them in if you want to. Let's go to Emma Elston. So, what tools do you recommend for pulling the data for analysis?
Oh, such a good question. So we are not very heavy on tools. We're very manual. So we use a lot of on-platform tools to pull data, but I think it's about how you interpret that data. So it's about not just having lots and lots of big data, but what do you do with that data? So I don't think tools have to be expensive. Certainly at Lynn, we don't use a lot of tools. We are now purchasing tools because as a business, we're growing. So we are investing in tech stack at the business. But when we were doing this, we certainly didn't have anything fancy. We were just pulling data from Facebook and from Instagram and from every other platform. And we were bringing that into a comprehensive space in-house, and we were interpreting that data on a regular basis.
Excellent. Thank you. Hopefully that's answered that for you, Emma. One from Ed Thomas. With all the data testing, insights, etc., is there any place for gut instinct?
That's such a good question. So I think as communicators, we are instinctive behavioral scientists, certainly applied. So I think our hypotheses typically are right. But what testing does is gives you the data back to confirm and validate that. So at Lynn, we might have a gut. We will use our research to support that gut instinct. We will ensure we go through a process to ensure it is not just an instinctive response. And that's validated by an evidence review, by primary research, by barrier analysis, all of that. And then our testing tells us whether we are right or whether we are wrong. And we are completely okay, by the way, to be wrong. There was one particular instance. We ran a campaign for Bron Avon community housing in Wales where, and this is like 2020, the timelines do merge in my brain. But we were brought in to increase survey responses to a legally mandated Welsh Government survey on rent charges and service charges, rent, whatever. So it was quite a technical piece around getting quality feedback from tenants who probably were furloughed, were probably bereaved. It was a really bad time to be asking questions about whether they felt their rent was fair. So we were brought in and we did our analysis, everything that we do as per the Lynn framework, which we use in the business. And we came up with 2 creative concepts. One that was quite traditionally housing association, and then one that was really innovative and really sort of looked really cool. And we liked it as a team. Our client liked it. We thought, this will really stand out on social media feeds, et cetera, et cetera. However, when we tested it, the audience absolutely preferred the more traditional housing creative. So sadly, we had to bin that, and we put that traditional creative forward, and that led to an 805% increase in responses. So what that meant in real world terms, 40 responses is typically what they get. We got them 362 responses within 4 weeks. And it was really high quality. People weren't moaning. People were giving real actionable intelligence that really, really helped shape their strategy.
Amazing, fantastic, and amazing campaign is a comment from Ruth Dale, well-deserved winner NHS Communicate. So thank you, Ruth.
Ruth, and you sponsored that, so thank you.
Yes, so we've got one from Jules Loveland, who incidentally recently CIPR accredited practitioner. So well done, Jules. Emoji love for Jules. And where can we learn more about behavioural science? Are there books or education you recommend?
Hi, Jules. You've probably heard me say this a lot, that there is a lot out there, but we know that in our industry, there is a capability gap. So at Lynn, we run the BS Monitor, which we ran last year, is on our website, lynn.global, and we are going to be running again to map capability in second year. So please do take the survey as it comes out. There is a capability gap. There's a lot out there, but I think it's about consistently learning and CPD within that space as well. So in terms of introductory, you've got things like obviously Nudge, the book, which is now, there's a second version of it, apparently the final version, but we'll see. There is Influence by Robert Cialdini, which is a really, really good way of understanding some of these cognitive biases. There's, of course, if you want something more technical, but it is a cornerstone of behavioral sciences, Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman and Tversky. And then there's also Inside the Nudge Unit by David Halpern. So all of that will give you some introductory structure. There's some really good stuff coming from the world of podcasting. So Katie Milkman runs Choiceology, which is a great podcast. So I definitely recommend that. There's quite a lot of podcasts there as well. But ultimately, I think application is about understanding the research coming out from the world of behavioral science. There's a lot of reading scholarly papers and literature that's coming out. That's, all the trials that are happening in this space, and being aware of that, being able to apply that back. At Lynn, we do quite a lot of behavioral science thought leadership as well, with this view to help build capability. So our website will have a lot of resources. We also have the Cut to the BS, our fortnightly newsletter. So feel free to sign up to that on lynn.global.
Excellent. So many resources, and there is as well Ruth Dale's Behavioural Change Marketing Bootcamp to get you started as well. So absolutely. I did have a question before you talked about the Bronafon example, Shayoni, which was a really good example because we do a lot of work in housing ourselves. Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's too much focus on, or do you think too much focus on behavioural science or data insight helps or hinders creativity? Do you have behavioural scientists, the data people, the data geeks fighting tooth and nail with the creatives?
No, we don't. I think there is this fear that data and behavioral science, or data and science, stifles creativity. But we find with all the work we've done over the 3 years, it's the opposite. It actually enhances creativity, but it's the application of that. So how do you interpret that research and put it into creative communication? So fundamentally, what we see with our clients is you've got great behavioral scientists and great creative communicators, but each of them don't understand the other. Yeah. So that's where I think tensions might occur. But when you have behavioral scientists who understand communications and communications who understand behavioral science, that interpretation into can't speak anymore, Asif. Not enough coffee. That interpretation into application is much more fluid. So all our campaigns are, as I've said, 100% driven by research, 100% driven by data. They are all very creative and have won awards, taken awards from the creative bigwigs in London. So I don't think that stifles creativity by any means.
Excellent. Repping for Wales there, Shayoni. Repping for Wales. So absolutely fascinating. I've loved that, and the audience have loved that too as well. So come on, show your emoji love for Shayoni. That was amazing. And there'll be loads of people catching up on this on replay as well.
Brilliant.
So thank you so much for that. Some great questions from the audience as well. Don't forget to take pics of the sessions, share on social, Twitter, LinkedIn, Insta. They're all prize winning. Your tweet can win a prize, or your LinkedIn post or your Insta post could win you a prize as well. And there is the leaderboard, so you know what to do. We've got the networking lounge that's open until our next session, which is 11:45 with Rebecca Ben. So get into the networking lounge, meet some of your fellow Comms Hero peers, and bag some points for the leaderboard at the same time. So double whammy. So thank you, Shayoni. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.